Hey, Raymond here from the Beginner Photography Podcast, and today we're talking about growing a wedding photography studio. Whoa. Okay, let's get into it.
Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast with Raymond Hatfield, the podcast dedicated to interviewing world-class photographers to ask them the questions you want answered. Whether you want to be the world's best wedding photographer, family photographer, pet photographer, or you just want to take better photos of your kids growing up, we will get you to start taking better photos today. Here with you as always, husband, father, home brewer, LA Dodgers fan, and award-winning Indianapolis wedding photographer, Raymond Hatfield.
Hey everyone, Raymond here from the Beginner Photography Podcast. I'm your host as always, and I am just trying to stay warm here in Indianapolis as it is starting to get colder and colder every day. Ooh. Hopefully you guys are staying warm, and hopefully you, if you're based here in America or the United States, had a great Thanksgiving. Maybe you got to spend time with family and friends. I did. We had a Friendsgiving as well as the family traditional Thanksgiving, and we had a really good time. It was nice hanging out with everybody and just kind of relaxing. I love this time of the year, except for the weather. I hate the weather, but the amount of time that you get to spend with family and friends is worth everything. So I had a blast. I hope that you did as well. And one thing that my wife and I were sitting there talking about things that we were thankful for. And one of the things that I brought up that I was really thankful for is that, I just realized that this is going to get deep for a second. So when we first started the podcast, Callum, the other wedding photographer who started the podcast with me, when we first started this thing, the first thing that we could think about was growth. We're like, how fast can we grow? How big can we get? How many downloads can we get as fast as possible? And as time goes on, I've changed that mindset. I really don't care how big this podcast gets, because I know that every interaction that I have with one of you listeners is genuine. To me, I'm not really good with remembering everybody's names or faces, and the internet just kind of amplifies that, right? It's harder when all you see is a name right there and you don't get to get a good idea of that person's personality. And with the podcast the size that it is, everybody who's in the group, at least in the Facebook group, I feel like I have a deeper connection with them than I would if the podcast had maybe, 1 million downloads a month or something like that, which is an insane number of downloads. So really what I was thankful for was you, all of you. I'm so thankful that you are here and you're listening to me, because I know starting out that it's tough, right? It's so tough to figure out where to learn photography from. It's everywhere. You can learn photography from everyone. You just YouTube photography tutorials and a million things will come up, but you don't know that person. You don't know what their philosophy is on photography. You don't know if and I still struggle with this today, trying to find people to interview. You don't know if they're just going to say, you got to do it this way. This is the only way to do it. Otherwise, you're going to fail completely. And that's not what I want, because for every photographer out there who is successful, there's equally as many different ways to become a successful photographer. And I don't want my job to tell you, well, you got to do this. You have to feel this way. You have to provide these things. You have to charge this much. You have to shoot this way, because that doesn't apply to everybody. And I don't want you to think that you have to follow one path of success just because somebody else had success with the way that they did things. So I'm so thankful for you that you're here, because the last thing that I was worried about when I kind of started to go in this direction was that it would feel like there wasn't enough information, that there wasn't enough meat on the bones, so to speak, if I'm trying to just express different ways of getting to wherever it is that you want to get in photography. So thank you. All of you, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for joining me on this journey, for letting me help you become a better photographer. So one thing that I wanted to do, obviously we just had Thanksgiving, like I said, here in the States. I wanted to showcase a recent review from iTunes from one of our subscribers, and this one comes from Elizabeth, who also it is part of the Beginner Photography Podcast 14-day video course called Photography Basics for Beginners, a 14-day video course, which you can find on the beginnerphotographypodcast.com. So Elizabeth says, I've just recently started dabbling in photography, and this is just a great podcast. The interviews are informative and entertaining, and Raymond feels like a friend from the get-go. Great work. Keep it up. Well, Elizabeth, thank you. Obviously, we've never met before. So to say that hearing my voice feels like a friend, then that makes me feel really good. Like I'm doing the right thing, that people like you, other beginners, are getting value out of the podcast and not feeling like it's just kind of a wash. So again, thank you so much. And I know that you're going to get a ton out of this interview. But if anybody else enjoys this podcast or gets any sort of value out of it week after week when we come out with episodes, I can't tell you how grateful I would be if you just left me a quick review in iTunes. And typically the point of reviews just lets the podcast grow bigger, I suppose. And I know that I just talked about how I don't want it to get huge. I guess that's kind of a hard concept for me to put into words. But what reviews do is it lets me get bigger guests, right? More guests who have been in the industry longer, who have really brought a lot of information to the photography industry, and they see those reviews and know that it's a serious podcast, and I can in turn bring those interviews straight to you. So if you just have 10 free seconds, I would love if you left a review for the podcast in whatever podcast app or player that you're listening to right now. You can even do it on a computer just by opening up iTunes, searching for the Beginner Photography Podcast, and leaving one there. So that's it. Well, I don't want to take up too much time. I really want to get straight into this episode. There's a good chance that you are going to know who today's guest is. He hosts a podcast called the Six Figure Photography Podcast, which is all about the business of photography. And he interviews a lot of guests as well, trying to figure out how to optimize your business and how to serve your clients and provide better experience all around so that your clients will he wants to focus on service first, and then profit will come naturally because of that. And I think that it's a great model. So anyway, I'm talking too much about the interview. Why don't we just go ahead and get on into it so that you can hear it for yourself. This is my interview with Ben Hartley. You may know today's guest is the host of the Six Figure Photography Podcast, or you may know him from his multiple Fearless Photography Awards, or you may know him from his countless photography conferences that he speaks at, or you may know him from his popular six-figure Facebook Live videos where he answers your questions and talks about having the right mindset to use photography to serve. The point is, today's guest is everywhere, all the time, including at home, taking care of his newborn twins. So today I'm excited to talk to Ben Hartley. So Ben, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Raymond, thank you so much for having me. Dude, that was, I am like blushing over here, man. That was so good.
Dude, you're everywhere.
I feel like you really did your research, man. And I totally respect and appreciate that. Usually, there's like a little like one line write up that like says something. Anyhow, thanks, man. I appreciate you putting my family in there too.
Yeah. I think before I started podcasting, the Six Figure Photography was definitely one of the podcasts that I listened to and kind of inspired me to start doing this. So I first heard you on the PhotoBiz Exposed podcast with Andrew Helmage, and I just thought that your outlook on photography was so great. That's when I started following you, and you're just a very genuine person, and you really are trying to use photography to serve, which is why I think you're a great fit for the Beginner Photography Podcast. So that's why I wanted to reach out and bring you on, man.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it.
Of course.
Awesome.
So, as I mentioned, you do host a Six Figure Photography Podcast, and because you run a Six Figure Photography studio, and I'm sure that didn't just happen one day. You weren't like doing something and then the next day you're running a Six Figure Photography studio. So can you tell me how you got into photography in the first place?
Yeah, for sure. I want to start by saying this because you said it, but you didn't quite say it as the way that I do, and I like it. I think it's important to recognize that you don't. I had a mentor in my life. Like I think that mentors are so critical. There was a critical mentor that I had in my life during college. His name was Michael Brown, and he taught me that you don't wake up one day becoming something that you were not already becoming. right? And so even as we're talking about this, like, it's not like, I think there's this jaded mindset, not even a jaded mindset. It's just the reality that we're always surrounded by like the success stories everywhere, right? And so it's easy to even see something like the Six Figure Photography Podcast or Ben Hartley or whatever it may be, and to see the pedestal and to be like, man, I wish that would be me, or like, how did he get that? And it's just it's so healthy to realize that if anybody looks like some great success, it's because there was a lot of work that went into it. There was a lot of work. And look, I also recognize the fact that maybe all the work wasn't necessarily them. I think that other businesses or our parents or people who've come before us can also do the work on our behalf. But there's a lot of work that goes into it. And so I appreciate the question as far as the roots go. So man, beginning. How far back you want me to go, man?
I mean, like the first time you picked up a camera, like when did you realize like this could be a thing for me?
Yeah. So, okay. So background, I'm an artist, actually. I don't think of myself truly. I really don't. I don't think of myself as a photographer. I think of myself as an oil painter. And that's kind of interesting. It actually all began in high school. It began farther back than that in terms of drawing, painting, that kind of stuff. And high school is where it really took off. I think this is so good to understand. I literally transferred high schools, Raymond. I left my high school during my junior and senior year, and I went to an entirely different school solely because they had a better painting program. I think that's so. You hear about kids leaving school because there was a scholarship, or there was a better sports program, or there was I just think that I only say that because I want you to understand like where my head was at, where my drive was at, where my spirit and all my energy was at. Like I was in a junior in high school making like literally, dude, my paintings in high school were like 7 feet tall, 4 or 5 feet wide, like these massive paintings. And my dad keeps bringing them home from our basement, dropping off at my house. Like, stop bringing me these huge paintings, Dad. That's okay. Anyhow, and so I think that was some of the initial roots was early on recognizing that I was good at something and then putting all my chips in on my strengths, right? And going full in on that. So anyhow, then I went to college, became an oil painter. I did some photography in college, some darkroom stuff. I got really involved in ministry. Ministry has always been an important part of my life. In college, it became an even more important part. I went full time, actually. For 2 years, I was in full time ministry after graduating. And I think ultimately it came to a head where I love people. I think people are the most important things on this world. You could say I think relationships are. I'm trying to figure out the exact dichotomy between those two, but I think people and relationships are the most important thing in this world. And I love to make things look good. So if I can serve people and I can make things look good, I am happy, right? That's like my goal right now. And so wedding photography became a really natural kind of transition for me to do both of those things.
Okay, that makes sense. So where did you go from, obviously, like you said, you put in all your chips to become an oil painter. You really wanted to stretch that creative muscle. That's when you found photography. Has photography become more valuable to you than oil painting, or is it just that oil painting either takes more time or isn't as viable as an option? When and how did you make that decision?
It's a great question. So I think here's the deal. I think the reality is oil painting is my love. Mm-hmm. Oil painting is like maybe my hobby would be a good way to put it. And I've almost like protected it in that realm. Like I want it to be my hobby. I want it to remain my love. Gotcha. And so it's the thing that I return to. There's also the practice. I mean, look, as much as I'm like play to your strengths and rah and go for it, I'm also very practical. And so Midwest Ohio, right? And my oil paintings too, they're very figurative, hyper-realism. I also just recognize that it's not going to be right out the gate going to be able to provide for my family the way that I can with photography.
That makes sense.
So just recognize the practicality behind things. So I still have an easel up in my house. I still have all my painting supplies. And I was actually knee deep in a painting. And then we found out we were having the twins. And so we had to pump the brakes. I'll probably get back to it in a couple of years, I guess. It's a very leisure thing to just sit around and oil paint. It takes a lot of time and commitment and just kind of mental headspace. And so I've preserved it and protected it off to the side.
So just kind of side note about how long does it take to oil paint a 7-foot tall, very large painting?
Yeah. I mean, I spend like 400 plus hours usually on a single piece.
This is like
almost
months of work.
Yeah. It's like months of work. So
cool. That's awesome, man. Yeah. Well, so now you've made the decision. You're like, I like photography. It's more of a viable option for my family. And as a career, I still get to create something beautiful for these people in a way that I can serve them. When did you decide maybe I want to bring on multiple photographers and create a studio?
Yeah, sure. This is an interesting conversation that a lot of photographers have at some point in their career. There's a lot of conversation out there about associate photographers, expanding the brand, all that kind of stuff. For me, it actually came out of loneliness. It was never really a money-driven decision to expand what Leslie and I were doing. Leslie's my wife. She was my right-hand girl when we first started out. Before we were Ben and Les Photography. That was our original brand, Ben and Les Photography. Built a name for ourselves there. But look, I've done a lot of things. Just to be clear, I mean, I skipped a lot of steps. Like I was trying to go for like big picture bullet points.
Yeah, of course.
So like at one point, I was a motion graphics, video animator, like, doing like, Cinema 4D, 3D animation, 2D animation, anyhow, that kind of stuff. I was a professional longboarder for a while.
Oh my gosh.
So there's a few steps in between, but all of those things were very community driven. When I was at the design studio, I got to go into a studio and work alongside two other creatives who were just like on either side of me. And when there was an idea, we could brainstorm and we could push each other. And when someone would come back with something, we could continue to build into them. And just the whole process going out on a shoot became a really fun thing. Like I don't think I've laughed and had so much time creating in that type of environment. And then again, longboarding, the community that is there within the longboard scene. Going further back with ministry is so community focused. And so then I came out of all of that and it was just like the lights went out and it was just my wife and I. And look, I love my wife and my wife loves me. Right, babe? Right. But when you're at it alone in your living room or in your basement or in your garage, day in, day out, day in, day out. And if the needle doesn't move, it's your fault. And you're trying to kind of do everything in a vacuum and you look for these little pockets of fresh air where you get to go to a conference or go to a workshop, right? This is why WPPI is such a hit. Everyone wants to get out of their basement, get out of their living room and go to Vegas and see other people and network and bounce these ideas off of other people. Right. I didn't want to wait. I didn't want to wait for that. I didn't want to do that one day out of the year. If I valued it that much, why am I doing it one day out of the year?
Of course.
And so we really set out to look for another like-minded couple that loved people above everything else. Look, you could be an okay photographer, but if you loved the hell out of people, then I think that we had a chance. And I was also obviously looking for some roots and producing amazing work as well. And there was another couple that we got connected with, and they were doing great stuff and we were doing great stuff. And so we had this conversation, what would it look like to do great stuff together? Mm-hmm. And that's how it got started.
So now, obviously, like I've seen lots of six-figure photography live on Facebook. I've seen the studio, and there's several other photographers. So at the point to where you joined forces with another husband and wife photography team, when do more people come on, and how do you determine? Actually, I guess that's not really so much of a beginner question. That's more of a personal question for myself. But
we can talk about it.
At what point does it? What am I trying to say here? How am I trying to put this together in words? Now you have multiple photographers, right?
Just to be clear, there's only one other.
Oh, okay. There's one other photographer.
There's me, there's Ben. Ben's the OG Ben over there.
Ben
So
and
me, Ben,
Right.
and we have one other. And I'll tell you exactly how he came about. It doesn't need to be a long-winded story. He came about because we weren't looking for him. To be quite honest, we weren't looking to gain another photographer. Ben and I were quite content doing what we do with our wives. But when you start to get good at your craft and known for what you do, other creatives start to hire you, right? You start to attract other photographers who are like, well, like, look, if I'm going to get married, I want to hire an amazing photographer. So they came to us. And so there was a gentleman, Steven, who came and he hired us. He was a photographer here in Columbus, producing amazing work. He wanted the best, and he came in and he had us photograph his wedding. Ben Adams, other Ben, actually shot his wedding. And about a month after the wedding, maybe it wasn't even that. No, I think it was about a month because Ben was just wrapping up the photographs. He looks over at me and he's like, dude, I'm just going to throw this out there. Steven is a really, really, really good dude. I really enjoy him. I just want to plant this seed in your mind. What would it look like to bring Steven on? That was it. That was all the conversation was. And so we got a chance to really look into his work, and we knew we loved the kid. He was just like one of the most loving hearts ever. He almost loves like too much. Sometimes we're like, no, I'm kidding. But like, he's just like, he's the kindest individual that we have here. He actually really helps to anchor Ben and I at times. And so it happened because we weren't trying to make it happen, I guess.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. So what purpose does he serve for Style and Story Creative, your studio?
He's one of our head photographers here.
Oh,
yeah. So there's three head photographers. There's myself, Ben Adams, and Stephen Lowe. Yep.
Okay. So that's what you meant by the one other photographer. Okay. I understand.
There you go.
So do you guys all shoot weddings together? Do you guys all shoot weddings separately? How does that work?
Good question. No, we don't shoot weddings together. I would say this: 9 times out of 10, we do not shoot weddings together. Mm-hmm. If you happen to get Ben and Ben or Ben and Steven,
you got the greatest deal ever.
You're really lucky. No, we all shoot our own weddings. Yep. So we're all out photographing our own weddings.
Okay. And another question for people, beginners thinking about possibly opening up a studio. Mm-hmm. How do the weddings get differentiate or not different? How do the weddings get split up and divvied up between photographers? Yeah,
this is one of the top questions we get all the time. When a lead comes in, how do you decide which one of you photographs the wedding? There's a lot of practical questions that we just kind of go down the list through, right? And so like the number one most practical question is, who's available, right? Do you know what I mean? Like, well, Steven's unavailable. Somebody already booked Steven. Somebody already booked Ben. Looks like it's my gig, right? Mm-hmm. So we look to see who's available. Let's say that all things are equal. Let's say that all 3 of us are available. At that point, we get pretty involved in regards to asking questions and that kind of stuff in the initial contact form. And so we're looking to see, were they a bridesmaid at one of our other weddings? We literally will go find them on social, Instagram, Facebook, see who has mutual friends, right? Does Ben Adam have like 50 mutual friends and I've got one?
He's probably going to be the right choice.
We literally are going to move them in that direction because there's a relationship there. There's connection. We'll also look at things like, where is the wedding? Is it from my hometown? Is it from Steven's hometown? Is it from Ben Adam's hometown, right? And so whichever hometown it's from, we'll start maybe moving on. This looks like a great wedding for Steven. It's from his hometown. There's probably some relationship and connection there. So those are some of the things that we look at, right? Let's say that still all things are equal, right? Now we're going to go back and now we'll look at some things that are a little bit less important to the actual client, more important to our side of things. And that's like, look, if the wedding's in May, and Ben Adams already has 3 weddings booked and I have 0. Well, I think that, we should probably start to fill my May up a little bit more. And so again, just very practical things, we'll start to go that way. And so, that's where it begins. But understand this, from the moment that a lead comes in, it gets, we go through all this together. By the way, we also go through it together. Like we discuss it as a team. Like we're really looking like, do you know this person? Have you we're looking to see if there's any relationship from that point on, before any contact ever happens with the couple. Once we decide whose it is, it's theirs. So let's say that the lead comes to me. We decide this is the right fit for me. I photographed, a wedding that they were a part of. They mentioned me in the thing. I'm going to take it. And so at that point, every phone call, every email, every text, every video I send, every meeting, I'm the one there.
Right? Of course.
This is now my couple. Makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. It's a very systematic approach, and it's not It seems like you've removed all the ego out of who gets...
There is zero.
Right. And that's what I love, because I feel like sometimes, especially for beginner photographers who are always worried about, I don't know, how there's somebody right down the street who will deliver twice as much for half the price. There's always sort of this competition of like, I have to be better than that person. I have to book this gig. And it seems like you have built your own community there within your studio. And removing that ego has got to be the most important thing that you've done, and that's just so cool. I love that.
Thank you, man.
But as somebody who does run a studio, and your studio shoots a ton of weddings, what's some of the most important things that beginners mess up when it comes to working with clients?
I would say a couple of easy things that we still have to overcome hurdles and create systems to make sure it doesn't happen is communication. Is just like, because again, we are, for many of us solopreneurs, where we are the creative, we're the marketer, we're the social media expert, we're doing our SEO, web design, album design, editing our images, just like everything, right? Office manager, we're doing our own taxes. Like, we shouldn't be. We're husbands, we're wives, we're parents. And so often I just see when that ball drops. And it was fun. I was speaking at Show at United a couple weeks ago. Zach and Jody Zach Gray, they were on stage, and they were talking about, they painted this picture, and I totally related. And this, so many of you have experienced this. Zach was telling the story of like, you're going about your week, and it's great. And Wednesday, Wednesday comes along, and you get in your inbox and you start going through things again. It's not like you just wait till Wednesday. You're going through your inbox every day. You're going through, and you see an email, and it's from the most like perfect bride ever, right? Like, the venue's amazing, the budget's there, they're exactly your ideal client. They want you, and then you notice as you go to reply that it hit your inbox 5 days ago. Oh. And like, your heart is like sinks. You're like, shoot. Yeah. And this is just like an all too familiar feeling, I think, for photographers. And again, even as I say this, Raymond, like, these are like, I haven't escaped it yet, and you can put in safeguards and you can put in systems, but it's a constant push and pull and a battle to make sure that communication's there. I think it's one of the biggest things.
Okay, that totally makes sense. So kind of as a follow-up, I've heard beginners ask me questions like, I've booked a wedding and the wedding's not for another year. Is there just like radio silence between that time, or like how much communication is going on between then? So how do you as a studio put together communications for the long haul until the
for sure. I think going right along this thing, the things that you can systematize and schedule, that's when you're going to be in the best shape, right? Especially when you start getting out to 20 weddings, 30 weddings, 40 weddings. And so we use a system called Tave. There's a ton of CRMs, client relationship management software, right? That you could use. Tave is just one that we're currently on right now. It's really, really powerful. It's almost too powerful, by the way. It's like deep. You can do some super intense stuff with it. And so for a beginner, there's going to be a little bit of learning curve. But once you're in it and you get it built out, you can create workflows that end up building into Tave. And so things like, reminders, like where each person will have a checklist, send this person a text 30 days before the wedding, make sure they get the gift 6 months before, like all these things that you're getting reminded of. And again, you can actually automate that stuff within Tave. And so with customization involved as well. So a system like that really, really helps. Some people are a little bit more like, they like to see things physical out in front of them. I'm a big fan of an app called Trello. I like to do, if you're going to go physical, I also like to have it in both worlds. I like to have a physical world and then also the digital kind of integration where if I'm on my phone, I can see quickly. And so, we've got like a whiteboard. There's a whiteboard right here. And with our whiteboard, maybe you literally kind of build out a timeline, and you can move your clients across the timeline as little magnets. So when somebody books you, you get a magnet and you like put their name on it and you move them across your workflow timeline.
Gotcha.
And you can do the same thing digitally within Trello. Trello essentially creates there's
like
a lot of ways.
Based cards.
Yeah, say that again.
Like movable based cards.
Yeah, movable based cards. You've got like a linear workflow, and you've got a card, and you can just move it across that workflow.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. So during that time, are you just checking in to say, hey, how are things going? Or are you sending them information that may help them on their wedding day?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things we do. So let me try to like work my way through. First off, they book and you want to immediately when someone books, like that day they book, send them something, send them a like essentially it's a confirmation, but it's a thank you. It's an appreciation. It's that thing that helps remind them that they made the right choice.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because as soon as somebody buys something, there's this thing we call buyer's remorse. No matter what it is, you question like, was that the right move? And to go home and to have the next day or 2 days later, something really special and unique come from that thing that you just bought from that person, just to reaffirm like, yes, you made the right decision. I'm there for you. Do you know what I mean? It reminds them that you're looking out for them. And so something like that right off the bat. From there, we've got a number of things that are going to take place in regards to, is there an engagement session? So we start to look into scheduling that, planning it. That kind of stuff. We do some fun things too. I think I learned this. There's a lot of stuff that I've learned from amazing other photographers and educators. I believe I learned this from Zach Gray, but I also forget. So right now Zach's going to get the credit.
Yeah.
I love that. I don't think everything that you send to your client should be like red sirens, like you've got to do something, like your contract needs filled out, you owe a payment, we need to schedule your engagement pictures, your wedding's coming up, have you filled out your timeline? Right. I think that our clients start to see, when you do that, they start to see your name in their inbox as like oh shoot, what's wrong, what do I need to do? Do you know what I mean?
A little bit of
I like to sprinkle in to the inbox I just because emails.
Okay, cool. I like
just
that.
Like
that's
throughout the timeline, just like, and it's usually got like a ridiculous GIF in it, like Elmo freaking out or something. And they're just because emails. They're like, hey, I was thinking of you. I saw this, or I don't know. Like, I want to also make our interaction like enjoyable and not always the house is burning down. You have to do something. So just because emails are nice, it's great to send out a gift, at some point along the way.
And all that just goes back to like serving your client, right? It goes back to making them feel better. The whole like, I'm going to create something beautiful for you doesn't start on the wedding day. It starts from that first interaction. And that's what it is that you're trying to build. And I love that idea of just sending stupid emails. They're like, hey, everything's going good, with like a gif of I don't know, like Leonardo DiCaprio drinking champagne from that Great Gatsby movie.
Yes, exactly.
Just helping out and being nice.
And it's trust. You're building and establishing trust. That way, when you show up on the wedding day, you are not the photographer. I show up on the wedding day, and it's like, yo, Ben's here, and I get to be like, what up, mother? Yeah. Whatever it is. I'm just like, you get to like be in and a part of it, which then in turns means that you get better photographs because it's more natural and you're a guest and you get that realness with them. You don't have to be the fly on the wall. I understand the desire to be photojournalistic. Turns out you can be photojournalistic without having your back 20 feet against the wall, right? You can be photojournalistic and in and present. I'm a huge fan of wide and tight. I should be more clear. Wider lens, tighter into the subject.
Of course.
Anyhow, cool.
Yeah, no, I'm the exact same way. I know that you recently made a switch to Fuji, and that was exciting. I've been a Fuji shooter for a while as well, and
what do you want?
I love the X Pro 2s. I love them.
Yeah,
I love them so much. But it's the same thing. It's the 35-85 combo. And I just basically stick with that 35 all day and just get as close as I can. Because it does. It's like this feeling of intimacy when you're that close. And yet you're still able to get a good amount of the surroundings. So anyway, totally off topic there. Next question.
I love talking tech.
Well, usually that's the thing about this podcast is that we don't really talk about photography a lot. Like there's not a lot of technicals. Like what I want to get out of all of this is, like, you're a leader in your field, right? Like, you've created a studio. It's a successful studio. I want to know the mindset that you're in. I want to know how you got there. And everybody else can figure out photography.
Dude, even going back to some of the very early questions of, like, how joining up with other photographers, that kind of stuff. Like, look, the difference is, like, if you are going to build out a studio, if you're going to bring on other people, you have to be you have to be, what's the right word? I just lost it. Your whole mind has to be, I've got to give. Everything has to be, I'm going to give more than I take. You have to be the least selfish person in the room. to be quite honest, because it's not easy. It's like it's like a relationship. It's like you have to over communicate everything. Communication. It has to be giving, and it has to be believing the best in the other person. Because when you start doing this and you start bringing companies together and money's involved, like, you have to believe the best in the other person, right? And so there's some things that we did early on to really kind of make sure that was in place. But the same thing is true with like your clients. Like, you want to know how to shoot a $10,000 wedding. Like, you've got to stop thinking, how do I make $10,000 a wedding? And instead, how can I provide so much value? How can I give so many blessings? How can I provide and melt so many faces that they just want to be able to reward me in some way? It's reciprocation. My goal is to give away everything possible, so that way they just feel the need to reciprocate back, right? And this is what I love, actually, and I love it and I hate it. When I first started the podcast, I called it the Six Figure Photography Podcast, and maybe I would go back and I would change that name. In hindsight, right, 2017, and maybe I'd go back and I'd change it. I wrestled back and forth with this because at the end of the day, I don't give a damn about how much money you make, right? I really don't. But understand this, like, your income is in direct relation to how well you serve your leads before people hire you, right? Before the photographer comes on your team, it's in direct relation to how well you care for them. And so at the same time, I also kind of like it because it pulls people in with this enticing title of like six-figure photography. Yeah. How are you going to make more money? And then it kind of just turns it all on its head and says, look, you want to make more money? Then stop worrying about money and start worrying about people. Start worrying about how you can provide so much value to somebody that they just want to reward you for that effort.
Yeah, I usually ask if you could go back in time and tell yourself one thing, like the first time that you ever picked up a camera, what would it be? And I think that you basically just answered it right there, right? Stop being selfish and try to give as much as humanly possible.
And I love what Gary Vee is a big fan of mine. You're going to know some trends here, but like he says this, and he says, stop worrying about dumb shit. Yeah. And we as photographers, especially beginner photographers, worry about dumb shit all the time. Absolutely. We're worried about the quality of our Facebook images or our pictures when we upload them to Facebook, and the resolution being weird. We're worried about clients taking one of our pictures and then putting an Instagram filter on it. And honestly, if they do that, then you send them a message and you say, I love that you put this picture up as your profile picture. Yes. I can't wait to see you again.
Yes. Yeah,
that's absolutely what you say. You don't say, copyright, please take this image down. Don't edit on top of my work. You're misrepresenting me. You don't say it like, look, stop worrying about stupid stuff. Keep your head down and move the needle forward. That's not going to move the needle. Right. Sorry.
No. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. You're preaching to the choir right here. One thing I want to know though is that on Six Figure Photography on your website, it says that you teach photographers how to create an abundant photography business.
Yes.
Can you tell me what that means, an abundant photography business? And what's the first thing that people need to know about what's the first thing that people who want to make six figures should know?
Well, we gotta rewind for a second. I host a workshop here. Sorry, I feel like that was kind of questions, and I keep being like, well, let's go back. I host a workshop every year, and it's called Abundance. That's not the only title. It's called Abundance, maximizing joy, meaning, and by the way, profits. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Maximizing joy, meaning, and profits. I believe that an abundant business is not a business that just rakes in the money, because that doesn't mean you're going to be happy, man. Of course. Like, I want photographers to have an abundance in joy, an abundance in meaning, in value, in giving value to other people, in meaning in this world of like existence, with their family, with their wives, with their husbands, with their children. Like, I think when you become so focused on profit driven, you get 15 years down the road and your kids have grown up. Like, I want people to have an abundance in joy, meaning, and when you do that, profits will follow, right? Yes. And so I mean, again, I pull people in and I turn it on its head a little bit. But also it's like, P.S., by the way, you do this, you start believing that people are more important. And this crazy thing happens that you get rewarded for it.
Of course. Well, everybody wants to feel important, right? Everybody wants to feel like they're validated in whatever it is that they want. Like you said, people don't want buyer's remorse. So Sure. That totally makes sense.
There still are, by the way, as much as I'm saying, there still are then practical things that like you still have to do. You have to care about your business. You have to be constantly looking. Here, let's talk about this. The number one thing that photographers should be doing if you're just getting started out is thrashing, is changing, and is looking for opportunities to change. You should be constantly looking for, how can I improve my pricing model? How can I improve my pricing strategy and structure? How can I improve the copywriting that's on my website? How can I improve my contact form so it gets better results? How can, like, not just how can I improve my photography, right? That's one side. It's like a 50-50 thing. It's one side of the coin. Improve your craft. It's expected. Your craft's got to be dope, right? It's expected. If it's not dope, you're out of business. So your craft is already dope, right? Keep improving that. But the other side is you have to be looking for opportunities to change. And I think too often photographers, we wait for change to smack us in the face.
Yes.
I'm not going to change my copywriting until Google changes its algorithm, and then I'll adjust.
Right.
Nah. You're out. I'm sorry, but you're out. Like, I'm not going to change my pricing until, I feel like my work is good enough. No, like keep evolving, keep changing, keep looking for opportunities to grow and adapt and change. And so what that means is you got to keep learning.
Of course. Well, this kind of leads into my next question. First off, I want to congratulate you for recently being voted one of the top 10 wedding photographers in the US, which is huge.
Thanks.
Like that's an insane award right there. But I want to know, have you ever had a moment, like an embarrassing moment at a wedding where maybe you weren't at your best?
Oh yeah. Of course I have. Okay, so let's talk about some of my most embarrassing moments. This is this one's going to get a little suggestive. So for all listeners, I feel like NPR or something, in the next at the 3-minute mark, you may want to cover the ears of your children while driving. So my wife. This is when we were Ben and Les Photography. My wife and I were shooting a wedding, and Raymond, I ripped my pants. I ripped my pants from front to back.
Oh no.
Yeah, and so. My wife, this is right before the ceremony too, by the way. So, and I didn't even here's the unfortunate thing. I didn't even do anything cool, Raymond, with my pants. I was just like, my pants were probably a little too tight or something. I don't know. And I was like walking, I think I bent down. Oh, I remember I was doing detail shots and I bent down to get a shot of like the shoes. Anyhow, so I ripped my pants. So my wife goes into the church to try to find a needle and thread, like super randomly. And dude, this is like, I don't know how this happened. She literally opened a closet door and there was a sewing kit in the closet door. It was like, seriously, we were like, no way, right? No way. So then we're like, well, shoot, I've got to take my pants off. I don't, but you've got to be in here. We can't go in the men's room because the wedding's about to start and guests are arriving. So I go in the closet. So I go in the closet with my wife. Ceremony's about to start. And I didn't want to take my pants all the way off. And so I just dropped them down to my ankles.
Oh no. Your wife was on her knees, I'm sure, trying to.
So good. She's on her knees and she's sewing.
Oh my gosh.
She's sewing the pants up. I need to tell this story more often. I didn't realize how funny it is. So she's sewing the pants up, and you guys, I kid you not, somebody opens the closet door.
Oh no!
They open the closet door to hang their coat up. So they open the closet door, and we're just like deer in headlights. We just like immediately turn over look over our shoulder, and Leslie's like, his pants ripped. I'm trying to sew him. Like, she gives us like really quick like thing. And they were just like, okay. And then just shut the door. And that was it.
Oh my God. Oh, that's wonderful.
I wish there was like a better end to the story. The middle is the best, I think.
Did you walk out and get like funny looks from that person?
No, I don't recall ever seeing that person again, actually. I think they may have thought themselves, I might be at the wrong wedding. I might be at the wrong place.
Oh my gosh, that is so great. That is so great. So now, always keep that second pair of pants in the car, right?
Yes, it's actually, that is a really valid point. Either a second pair of pants or a sewing kit. Probably second pair of pants makes more sense.
Right. That's hilarious. Oh, man. Well, Ben, I really want to be mindful of your time. You've been very generous in giving your time to be on the podcast. And normally at this point I ask, where can the listeners find you online? But you're kind of everywhere and very hard to miss. So where do you want listeners to come find you online?
Yeah, look, the podcast is great. So you can find it on iTunes, Six Figure Photography Podcast. So that's fun. Facebook. Turns out it's also Six Figure Photography on Facebook. But Instagram's different because Instagram, I just go straight personal on Instagram. So if you want to like hang out with my family, my kids, me, see, that kind of stuff, J. Ben Hartley. Side note, Raymond, it's J, just the letter J, and then Ben Hartley. My name is actually the letter J.
Your
My
first
name's
name,
the letter J.
No
Yep.
way.
It's totally true. My first name's the letter J.
Wow.
We'll talk about that another time when I come back on the show.
That's
yeah,
insane.
so J. Ben Hartley. And I need to be, I need to get, look, Instagram. I care about you guys, but I need to get more involved with Instagram. I understand.
I feel that way every single day as well, man. But it's tough being everywhere, unless you have somebody to help. So I really do appreciate you coming on, sharing everything that you did, talking about growing a photography studio, how you obviously got started, some of the troubles that you've had along the way, as well as the mindset shift that you need, and a very embarrassing moment at a wedding. So that is just, that's something that I'm going to think about next time I'm at a wedding for sure. That's so awesome. Ben, again, man, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Raymond, thank you for having me. I really appreciate you, buddy.
Whew, geez. If you have been following Ben for any sort of time online, you will know that he is a very outspoken personality. He's very in your face and he's very helpful, and he always wants to help somebody, right? And that's what he does with his Facebook Live videos and his podcast and his speaking engagements. That's all that he wants to do, and I am so happy to have gotten him on the podcast for him to share everything that he did. And it was a truly great podcast. And even as somebody who doesn't want to open up a studio with multiple photographers, I still got a lot of information out of this. And hopefully I was able to ask questions that didn't strictly pertain to wedding photography, but more of the service that photography can provide someone. So I hope that you guys got a lot out of this interview. If you did, I'm sure that Ben would enjoy hearing about it as well. So go ahead and head over to sixfigurephotography.com to let him know. Subscribe to his podcast and just give it a listen. Let me know what you think. So Ben, again, if you're listening to this, which I'm not sure that you are because you are insanely busy with everything that you're doing, I just want to say thank you again so much for coming on and sharing everything that you did. It was a massive amount, and I know that the listeners got a ton of great value out of it, which is hopefully the biggest compliment that you can get. I know how much you just want to serve and help people. So that is it for this week's interview. Yeah, wow. I thought that I had one more thing to say, but I guess if I remember it, I will put it in the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group. So if you're not in the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group, go ahead and head over to Facebook. Just search up at the top for Beginner Photography Podcast, and the group will show up right there. Send a request, and I will let you in right away. Guys, that's it. I hope that you guys had a wonderful Thanksgiving, and I hope that you're looking forward to the holidays coming up. Remember, these are great times. Lots of family and friends are getting together. Be sure to take a few photos while you're together. You never know how long you have with somebody, so just a single snapshot can be worth $1 million. So, all right, get out there, keep shooting, enjoy, be safe, and I love you all. I'll see you next week. Later.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Beginner Photography Podcast. Be sure to join the conversations on Facebook and Instagram. And if you want any links or resources we talked about in today's episode, check out the show notes at beginnerphotographypodcast.com. See you again next week.